From the very beginning, it was God's plan to redeem His creation back to Himself, to provide forgiveness, an avenue for relationship. And from the beginning of history, of time, God began to send pictures of what was going to happen. He sent an ark that was a story of how people were rescued out of their fate. He provided a tabernacle and then a temple that was filled with candles and bread and incense and a holy place where God would dwell with His people. And over generations, He kept saying to them that God wants to be with us. God is coming to be with us. God is coming to make us right with Him. He sent priests who would go before God on behalf of the people, would sacrifice on their behalf, and prophets who would speak to the people on behalf of God. He gave this picture of people who were enslaved being set free, being led out of their bondage and out of their past and into a brand new life. And on the night they were set free, a sacrifice and blood would be the sign that they were made right with God. Like again and again, for thousands and thousands of years, God kept sending these pictures. He gave imperfect kings as a sign that a perfect king, full of righteousness and justice, who would usher in peace, would one day come. All of these imperfect models Jesus kept putting in front of His people so that we would begin to understand what God was trying to do. And there were different pieces of the puzzle often, different perspectives on what God's work would accomplish. And then ultimately, God comes Himself as the Son of God, perfect, fulfilling all of those pictures from the past. The writer of Hebrews called them shadows. Like they were shadows of the real thing that was going to come someday. And 2,000 years ago, Jesus, God, steps out of heaven and takes on human flesh and fulfills all of the shadows and all of the pictures and all of the promises and all of the prophecies so that you and I could be made right with God. In just a few weeks, we're going to celebrate the culmination of Christ coming and dying and rising again as we celebrate Easter, which, by the way, is only 3 weeks away, which is hard to believe. So we're going to take this period leading up to Easter, and we're going to look at that last week. What was it like? What happened? We don't have enough time to cover everything in that last week, so we're going to take 2 quick stories this week and next week, and then in 2 weeks, we're going to look at Palm Sunday. Then we're going to have a Good Friday service. I hope you'll come to that, 6:30 on April 3rd, Good Friday. And then 3 services on Easter. You got that invite card. Bring somebody with you. Invite somebody to come. Just for clarity, the Good Friday service is going to be different from the Easter service. They're not a repeat. So Good Friday service, standalone service, and then 3 services on Easter. I hope that you'll be a part of those. The story we're going to look at today is in Matthew chapter 26, if you want to follow along in your Bible. Matthew's the first book of the New Testament. That's the second big section of the Bible. It's essentially the last fourth to a third of the Bible. Matthew's the very first book in the New Testament. This story is also found in Mark, which, by the way, we start reading Mark in our daily Bible reading. If you don't have one of the bookmarks with each day's reading, they're at the information desk. You can get those. We'll start Mark, and we'll read the Gospel of Mark up to Easter. Mark also tells the same story John also tells the same story. Luke tells a similar but different story. If you find a story that's similar to this in Luke, don't get confused by the different details. It's actually a completely different story about a completely different event, but it sounds very similar. Matthew, Mark, and John all tell this story. So we're going to read it from Matthew, but we're going to kind of pull from the other two Gospels. Sometimes in the Gospels, different authors had different perspectives. They were emphasizing different things about the story, and so it can be helpful to kind of synthesize the different versions of the story that we find. We're going to try to do that as we go through the story today. Matthew chapter 26, we're going to begin reading in verse 6. While Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. Although it's not crystal clear in Matthew's account up to this point, this is a dinner party. Like they're having a meal. The phrase reclining at the table is kind of a little bit of the clue. It's a little bit of the giveaway. Jesus is hanging out with people that he knew and people he was comfortable with. His disciples are there. Some of his friends are there. We are just days away from his betrayal, from his crucifixion. Jesus knows what is ahead. He knows the grief that is ahead, the pain that is ahead, the steps that he's going to take. Everything is being set in motion, moving towards his crucifixion. And so on this night, Jesus is gathered with some friends, just maybe to get away from it, like just to step out of the chaos for just a little bit and be with people that he knows and people that he knows love him. You maybe have been in that situation before. In a difficult time of your life, you just wanted to be with people that you knew. You knew hard decisions had to be made. You knew it was going to be a little bit of a difficult time coming up. But if you could steal a few moments in the evening just to be surrounded by people that you care about, you would take it. That's Jesus. Jesus is with his friends this night in a place called Bethany. Now, Bethany is a suburb of Jerusalem. It's about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. And so he's pulled away from Jerusalem where all the tension is, like where people are looking for him and people are asking about him. He's pulled away from there to this little place called Bethany. What we know about Bethany is Jesus had friends there, right? He had people there. He had people that he cared about. And he often visited Bethany. Certainly during this last week, it appears Jesus made multiple trips to Bethany. He would go into Jerusalem for the day, and then he would come out and he would stay with a friend at Bethany. On Palm Sunday, Matthew 21 tells us at the end of that whole day, Jesus comes in. We're going to study that in a few weeks. Jesus processes in. It's a day full of activity. At the end of that day, the Bible tells us Jesus goes out to Bethany and hangs out with his people, hangs out with his friends. That's what's happening in Matthew chapter 26. Traditionally, we think this event probably happened on Wednesday, although some people will argue for a different day. It is not important for us to get into that argument today. It's a couple days away from Jesus' crucifixion. Matthew tells us he's at the home of Simon the leper. Simon the leper. Now, we are going to assume Jesus had healed Simon the leper, because in the first century, you didn't go to the leper's house. That's just not who you partied with. You partied with a lot of people. You didn't party with Simon the leper if he had leprosy. Leprosy is extremely contagious. In the first century, there's no cure. So Simon had probably been healed by Jesus, and he's throwing this party. It's just that everybody still knows him as Simon the leper. It's like the nickname you got in middle school. Like, anybody get one of those? Yeah, Kristen did. It's like that nickname you got in middle school because of that thing that you did in middle school that you have stopped doing, by the way. You have stopped doing it, right? You stopped doing it, but you were doing it in middle school, and you got tagged with a nickname, and now everybody that knows you from middle school still calls you that name. And some people who didn't know you in middle school, because everybody kept calling you that name, they just started calling you that name. It's that, right? They know he's Simon the leper. That's what they've always called him for years and years. Doesn't have leprosy anymore, still middle school nickname. This is Simon the leper's house, and Jesus is hanging out with Simon the leper. Matthew tells us there's also a woman there, right? We met her. Doesn't give us a name. Mark doesn't give us a name. We have to get all the way to John's gospel to find out who this woman is. John tells us that Lazarus was there. Lazarus has just been brought back from the dead, so that's pretty cool. Lazarus is there, along with his sisters, Mary and Martha. Martha, John says, is busy serving everybody because, of course, Martha is busy serving everybody, if you know that other story about Mary and Martha. Mary is apparently the one that comes up to Jesus in the middle of this dinner party. And now the most awkward part of the whole story for us. Mary pours a bottle of perfume over the head of Jesus, which we don't see a lot in our time, right? Like, you've never thrown a party, hopefully, and somebody in the middle of the party just dumps a bottle of perfume over the head of somebody else. If you throw a party and anyone pours anything over anybody's head, party's probably over at that point, right? You got to call the cops. There's like stuff going on if somebody pours things over somebody else's head. So we come at this story thinking, that is weird. It wasn't so weird in Jesus' day. The Bible is filled with symbolism about anointing somebody's head. Old and New Testament is filled with all of this symbolism. In one sense, it was a show of honor. Like, this is the way we honor you. It's just a few drops on your head to say you are special. You are an anointed one. It was also customary, believe it or not, if someone had traveled from a distance, just to put a little perfume on their head. It was a way of refreshing them from their journey. Like, it was dusty, it was dirty. It's like, we're going to spruce you up just a little bit. Honestly, it may have helped with any odor you may have accumulated, right? Body odor was a thing back then. And so sometimes just kind of knock the edge off. We put a little perfume. It's sort of like that saying, if somebody offers you a breath mint, take it. Right? Like, don't ever turn down gum, breath mint, just take it. Same thing with perfume. Like, if they need to spritz you, let them spritz you, because they may be saying something. It wasn't the case with Jesus. This was a moment of honor. It wasn't unusual. The unusual part was just how expensive this perfume was. Mark says it was nard. Some translations say spikenard. This was very expensive perfume from India. So this was not the Walmart brand, right? No knock on Walmart. I like some great value now. Don't knock Walmart. This was expensive. John tells us it was worth a year's salary. We all make different amounts, but you do the math for you. You do the math for you. Well, it's tax season, right? You're filing. Whatever that number was, that's a good application, right? Whatever that number was for you, all of 2025, whatever your income was, that's how much this cost. And again, not just the expensive nature, but the fact that she poured all of it on him. This was not common. She broke it. There was no way she could keep any of it for herself anymore. There was no way she could hold on to a little bit. She couldn't sell a little bit, use a little bit and sell a little bit, use a little bit, save a little bit for later. She broke the jar and she poured it all over Jesus. Matthew and Mark said she poured it on his head. John says she poured it on his feet. In other words, it was everywhere. It was all of it. And it was everywhere. And it was expensive. The timing as well just seems weird. Right? Normally, this sort of recognition, this sort of honor would have been when you arrived. You know, we would show this special honor to you. Welcome to our home. This was in the middle of the party. This was in the middle of dinner. Things got interrupted. It was odd. It was uncomfortable. And yet she poured it all out. And then we start to get the reaction from the other people. Now, the Bible doesn't say this. I'm just going to assume there was that silent moment. You know how that happens? When something unexpected happens. Somebody gets into an argument maybe at a party. Somebody drops a plate. Like there's just that moment of, and then you're not sure who's going to speak first. And you're not real sure what everybody's going to say. Do you act like it didn't happen? Like there was that moment, there was just that pause. And then people started talking. Verse 8. When the disciples saw this, that's Jesus' disciples, people. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. They were indignant. Now, if you know this story, you were expecting that. If you've never read this story, that seems kind of an odd reaction. I mean, you might expect in that moment, if you were putting yourself in the party as I was describing it, and this happened, you might have thought, well, you'd be confused. What is she doing? You'd be perplexed. You'd be weirded out a little bit. You wouldn't know exactly what to make of all of this. But the Bible says, no, they weren't confused. They weren't perplexed. They were mad. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. In Mark's version, they, as a group, began to rebuke her harshly. That's his phrase. Like they all ganged up on her. First one, then another. John puts the words in the mouth of Judas and points out Judas was the treasurer, so he kept all the disciples' money, and he'd actually been kind of stealing some of the money, if you want to read it out of John. It's like he'd kind of been taking some of the money, and so we can assume John was running the Excel spreadsheet of, well, it would have cost this, and then I could have taken this, and nobody would have noticed. But Matthew and Mark says it wasn't just Judas. It wasn't just Judas. Now, maybe Judas started it, and then suddenly everybody else felt they had permission to get in on it. Everybody else thought, well, I'm mad too. Well, I agree. And all of them begin to reprimand her. They get angry at this sacrifice, at this moment. Here's what we know about ourselves. And it gets highlighted in the story. Eventually, what we treasure, it always comes out. It always comes out. Eventually. Those things that are at the top of our list, we don't go around telling people maybe what's at the top of our list. But there are those circumstances where what we really treasure just kind of slips out in an unguarded moment, in an unexpected moment like this. The disciples had not argued over money much before. Like, we don't find other stories where they got really bothered about money, but there was just this moment. Everybody's guard was down. Everybody's having a good time. We're at a party. And we get this window into what really mattered to them. You and I are the same way. We're the same way. If you followed me around for a while, Maybe not a day, maybe not 2 days, maybe a week or a month. If you could watch where I go and what I say and who I'm with and what I post and what I text, it'd come out. You'd see it. You'd find it. If I followed you around and I listened to your conversations and I watched who you were with and how you were when you were with them and what you posted and what you texted and what you emailed, it comes out. We sometimes hide those things because we know what we're supposed to treasure. Right? We all know what the right answers are. We all know what we should say we treasure. We all know what we should say. Well, this is number one. I mean, we're in church. Like, Jesus is always the answer at church, right? Jesus, the Bible, like that. We all know God's supposed to be number one. Church, community, like that's supposed to be number one. But then, if we watch ourselves, if we're observant of ourselves, like every once in a while, like that thing that we really treasure, it just kind of slips out. In a moment of reaction, not unlike the disciples, in an unguarded moment, this is really what animates me. We know we should prioritize our marriage, and our spouse, our family. We know that is the right answer. Like, we know all the right answers. We're supposed to say this and we're supposed to say this. But in those unguarded moments, treasure has a way of just getting out before we can catch it. No, this is really what I'm all about. No, this is really what drives me. And I don't want a lot of people to know. With the disciples that night, it just came out. And on the other side, with Mary, it just came out. It got revealed that for her, Jesus was everything. Everything. She wasn't playing a game. She wasn't trying to look like she was committed to Jesus. She wasn't trying to impress anybody, because obviously this did not impress anybody. She was not afraid of how anyone else responded or what anyone else thought of her. She just treasured Jesus. Jesus was not this nice little extra thing in her life. Jesus was not a good luck charm. Jesus was not a way to get something else. Jesus was everything. Worth everything to her. Not just a few drops, not just a spritz. Everything, all of me, everything that I have. Jesus told 2 short parables in Matthew 13 about treasure. They went like this. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Jesus said, if you understood the kingdom, if you understand who Jesus is, he'd be worth everything to you. He'd be worth everything. Nothing would rival his place in your life. Nothing would overshadow who he is to you. You do anything. You pay anything. You sell anything. You'd worship with anything. Mary has been following Jesus for years at this point. She's not one of the 12, but she's essentially a disciple, in that she follows him around and hears his teaching and supports his ministry. And her life has been changed. Jesus has just recently raised her brother from the dead. He was everything. She wasn't just saying this. This wasn't just a performance. This wasn't just a show. Jesus, you're everything to me. And sometimes we have to step back and in 2026, and we have to ask, what does my worship of Jesus look like compared to this story? When I come to say, to sing, Jesus, you are my treasure, does it look like this? Does it sound like any of this? Does it feel like you really are everything? I don't want to hold anything back from you. She pours out this perfume. The disciples get angry, and we continue the story in verse 10. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." Just for the ladies, if you haven't memorized a Bible verse in a while, I got one right here. Jesus said, "Why are you bothering this woman?" Right? Lots of application, ladies. Write it down. Put it in your phone. You're going to want to remember that. Jesus said, "Why are you bothering this woman?" Jesus says to his disciples, like, "Why are you mad, bro? Like, how does this affect you? Like, why are you so angry? What put you in a bad mood all of a sudden? What she has done is a beautiful thing. You don't get it. You don't see it. Because your treasure level when it comes to me is not what hers is. You don't see me in the way that she sees me." And they couch it in a discussion about the poor. Well, this could have been sold and we could have given the money to the poor. We have a way of over-spiritualizing subjects when we don't want to deal with the treasure problem. We have a way of over-spiritualizing our language, our interest. Like, we can couch it in really spiritual terms. We can couch it in really spiritual ideas. That's what they try to do. Well, we could have given this to the poor. Let me just give you a warning. Don't over-spiritualize to avoid addressing a hard issue. We said a few weeks ago that Scripture, church, our language as Christians can be used to manipulate. This is an example. This is an example of trying to over-spiritualize and manipulate a situation. Don't over-spiritualize. They're trying to deflect by sounding superior, by sounding spiritual, and Jesus will have none of it. One, because he knows their heart. But also, we do have to admit, in some cases, this is kind of a legitimate question. It almost sounds like Jesus doesn't care for the poor. We know that's not true because we know from the rest of his life and his teaching, he does care about the poor. But he says to them, the poor you'll have with you always. What Jesus reminds us of in this moment is that all of our doing for him or for others, all of our doing for others, all of those, what in some cases are very spiritual things, all of our doing for others is not a substitute for being with Jesus. And sometimes we deflect to the doing and not the being, not the sitting with, not the worshiping. Times when we aren't in a rush and we're not trying to check something off and we're not trying to prove something about our spirituality. We're not trying to prove something by the things that we did. Well, look at what I did. Well, look at what I'm doing. I'm really close to Jesus. Look what I did. Here's a moment she doesn't do anything but worship and treasure and prioritize. She doesn't come to Jesus with a list. Jesus, I just got like these 3 things, if you could. And Jesus tells us to bring our concerns to him. But in this moment of worship, she doesn't come and say, could you just do a couple more things for me? She is just fully focused on Jesus. How do you come to him? When in your life do you ever come to him just for him? Just to treasure him above all other things. Just to readjust that priority list in your life. Right? When you begin to see, like I began to see, that doing is getting more important. This other thing is getting more important. And Jesus, I want to make sure you're the most important thing. Verse 12, Jesus says, when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. It's Jesus' way of saying that there's stuff going on here, disciples, you don't even know. You don't even know. Storm clouds are already gathering in this week for Jesus. Tension is already growing around Jesus. And there was this one moment of worship. This little story is sandwiched between schemes and treachery. Like if you back up right before this story to verse 3, then the chief priest and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. So right before the story, we're told there's backroom stuff going on. They're worried about how to find Jesus, how to get Jesus, how to snatch him without creating a riot. They're scheming, the religious leaders are. They're scheming for when can we get to him. Right after this story in verse 14. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. You could take out the story of Bethany and this chapter would still make sense. You could remove those verses. Religious leaders are scheming. How are we going to catch Jesus? Judas steps up. I'll help you. But here's the power of this little story. In the middle of treachery, all of this scheming, all of this evil, in the middle of treachery, there's beauty happening. There's worship happening. There's pause. There's setting a heart on Jesus when other people did not understand. There's giving Jesus everything right in the middle of all the evil that's happening. Hey, we mention it from time to time. There's a lot of evil happening in our world. Maybe that's news to you. There's a lot of rough stuff. There's a lot of bad things. And right in the middle, the worst that's happening, you and I can set our hearts on Jesus. We could set our treasure on Jesus. Whatever hard thing you left off Friday and you're about to pick up again on Monday, whatever hard thing that was right here, you could put your heart on Jesus for a little bit. Whatever hard conversation you pressed pause on last night and you know you're going to have to pick it back up this afternoon, whatever that is, right in the middle, Jesus is saying, just come to me. Just treasure me. Just spend a minute with me. And so I'm going to invite us to do that. Whatever the bookends are for you, whatever the hard thing is for you, that you pause just long enough to be here, it's going to be there when you leave, but can we just treasure Jesus in these last few moments? God, we want to be like Mary. A heart like Mary that treasures you. We'll admit it, our heart Sometimes it looks like the disciples and stuff just comes out when we didn't mean for it to come out. We're trying to keep that in and trying to hide that. But if we're honest, we know when we look deep inside, like there's some other things that we've been treasuring way too much. And it just needs to be Jesus. First, last, always. Some of us dropped off a problem yesterday or the day before, and we got to pick it back up again tomorrow. But let this moment be yours. Let this moment just be us and you. Us pouring it all out, keeping nothing for ourselves, just pouring all of our heart out to you. You can do that as you sing in just a minute. You can come to the front and pray. We have people who'll pray for you if you just want somebody to pray over you this morning. I know you may not know them, but they will pray for you. They love you. They care about you. Let's stand and worship the Lord.